Hello, welcome to DecentraLounge, brought to you by GlobalStake, your institutional SOC 2 Type 2 certified, truly decentralized bare metal staking service provider. Today, we're welcoming Jeroen Offerijns to the show. Jeroen has a rich background in software engineering and entrepreneurship, having previously co-founded multiple startups and worked as a senior developer before joining Centrifuge in 2020. Since stepping into the CTO role, he's helped lead the protocol's transition from Ethereum native smart contracts to composable multi-chain RWA infrastructure, first being built on Polkadot, bridging to Ethereum, and now expanding to Solana and beyond. Under his technical leadership, Centrifuge introduced ERC 7540, a new Ethereum standard enabling asynchronous asset vaults, and launched Centrifuge v3, a modular framework for tokenizing and managing off-chain assets with institutional-grade compliance. At its core, Centrifuge is an open protocol that allows businesses to tokenize real-world assets like invoices, real estate, carbon credits, and use them as collateral for borrowing in DeFi. Their flagship platform, TinLake, has processed over $646 million in asset-backed loans and integrates with major DeFi players like MakerDAO and Aave. In recent months, Centrifuge has made headlines for launching a new RWA launchpad, issuing deRWA tokens compatible with both Ethereum and Solana, and exploring integrations with Base and Plume Network. With Jeroen at its helm and an engineering roadmap, Centrifuge has helped to shape the standards and infrastructure that will underpin a future where real-world finance seamlessly connects with decentralized networks. Jeroen, we're excited to have you with us today. Thank you for joining us on the show. Why don't we just start off with the background about how you got involved in this crazy world of Web3?
Yeah, absolutely. And well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. That was an incredible introduction. Very kind to hear everything and very nice overview. So really appreciate that. So it's a great way to kick this off. Yeah, so my name is Jeroen. Like you already said, so my background is in engineering. I grew up at a pretty young age learning kind of programming, kind of Adobe program, HTML, CSS, kind of the basics. And as a kind of in high school, started to do more serious stuff, started to do like freelance Web2 software development. And what I really enjoyed about all of that was kind of the ability to kind of use your own skills and really build new products for new users. And so already in my early 20s, what I quickly moved into was going beyond just engineering, going beyond just programming, and really finding roles where I could combine my technical skills with the ability to build products that really solve problems for users. I experimented and worked on several startups over those years, and with a lot of learnings and a lot of failures, but really a lot of valuable lessons in my kind of early 20s. What I also saw in that time is a lot of the complexities of the Web2 kind of ecosystem, all of the major kind of software as a service platforms that are underpinning kind of our current technology, which in many ways is incredibly impressive, but also is incredibly limited. And I think especially when you look at the financial services industry, where I had some experience as well to kind of see how that is all being built, and it really is many decades or almost centuries of kind of systems layered on top of each other and creating a lot of like, inefficiencies and intermediaries. And so I got involved with crypto about 5 years ago when I got in touch with kind of the team at Centrifuge. And I got connected initially as like the ability to help out on the engineering level, but very quickly realized that I think what Centrifuge was trying to do was very visionary, and I really aspired to that. Centrifuge already 6 or 7 years ago was working on this vision of bridging the real world assets, financial technology with blockchain technology and crypto. And while now in 2025, many of us might say, well, that's obvious, that's clearly where it's going to go, what's happening, that wasn't as obvious back then. And so I think the leadership of Centrifuge really set that vision there, and that really got me very hooked. And yes, I've really enjoyed working on actually executing that vision for the last 5 years or so. And although 5 years sounds like a long time, I do think what we are really trying to do is going to take 20, 30 years to really execute on.
No, that's super interesting. And for a couple of different reasons. One, you're probably one of the first guests in 4 seasons who had a backstory that really just came from an engineering perspective and not like most of us degens oh, hey, I bought some Bitcoin and I thought I was going to be rich, right? Like, so that is really interesting just hearing that part. And you sort of alluded to the great, I think, rich history and heritage of Centrifuge. One thing, for those who are watching or listening that don't realize, Centrifuge is actually the team that coined the initialism RWA that everybody uses for real world assets, which is an incredibly hot narrative. And to your point, it goes back, I think, 8 years now to 2017 when it was first getting started. And I think it was in 2020 when Centrifuge first put the first real world asset on chain with Tin Lake on ETH mainnet. So really exciting. And I guess let's dive into Centrifuge a little bit more about like what the platform is for people who are listening and don't know anything about it. RWAs is such a huge area right now and a hot button topic. And I've always seen Centrifuge as leading the vanguard in many respects when it comes to doing all this tokenization and bringing real world assets onto the blockchain.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so I think the reference to 2020 is really interesting, right? So I think maybe that's a good place to start as well. So when we started to build in kind of 2019 and kind of delivered in 2020 was really the ability to use real world assets or off-chain collateral in on-chain lending markets and stablecoins. What I mean by that is, right, like in 2020, you had Maker, stablecoin being launched, and Aave starting to grow, and all of these like early DeFi protocols. And none of them needed collateral, right? Like collateral to grow decentralized stablecoin, collateral to using lending markets to borrow against. But the reality is, right, like ETH and Bitcoin are the major assets that are around crypto are one, relatively correlated, and two, have a pretty speculatory, right, like risk profile. And there wasn't really any very stable assets besides actual like non-yield bearing stablecoins. And so what we try to do is look at, well, what are all these assets that are already out there, this existing financial system? What kind of assets can we bring to DeFi to give, well, to use as collateral really? Like the main initial use case is actually to use in the Maker multi-collateral DAI protocol. And so that's what we shipped with Tin Lake in the initial version. And we're actually, I think, very successful at, like, we launched several products, mostly private credit focused products. That quickly got like integrated into Maker, and we had some early success there. One of the challenges around that was that some of these assets were maybe relatively low risk compared to crypto, but relatively high risk in traditional financial markets. And so definitely that was a bridge that had to be crossed, and also like a knowledge gap that had to be filled. And so what we're doing was, I think, almost a little bit too early. If you kind of forward that to where we are today, so I think since about 1 or 2 years ago, one of the major things happened, of course, kind of in macro markets. What really changed is that treasury bill products became very attractive. And for a long time, like T-bill rates were actually higher than DeFi rates. And that's just a very simple sign that well, crypto markets are still pretty separated and not very efficient compared to traditional financial markets, right? Or at least separated from them. And so what we also moved into is actually how can we tokenize pretty simple T-bill products. But what is different there is, whereas with private credit, we focus on working with more fintech lending platforms and bringing relatively high rates products to crypto. With the last 2 years, we focus on bringing like very secure, very safe, low risk products, and doing that with incredibly institutional partners. One of the actually huge steps that I think is sometimes underappreciated is we started working with this asset manager called Janus Henderson. They are over a century-year-old asset manager that is currently managing about $400 billion. I think they're roughly number 40 in the world. They're very traditional, very conservative organization. And what we went on with them is kind of the story of figuring out where their strengths lie and where our strengths lie, and then combining that to the best of the outcome. And so we launched this regulated token T-bill fund together with them, which is not the highest rated fund in DeFi by far, rated, I think, AA by Moody's, S&P in particular, which is incredibly big success for us of like combining not just like really the technology strengths that I think I'm very proud that we have been able to build up with this kind of network and experience and relationships with more institutional parties. And so that's where we are now. And yeah, that kind of brings us to all of the next steps, but I'll pause there for a second.
Yeah, one of the things that I've always appreciated about Centrifuge is just how tapped in you are to the institutional network, right? Like here at GlobalStake, we are ourselves sort of institutional focused. And having been to several of the RWA summits that Centrifuge has hosted, you guys really get sort of the cream of the crop when it comes to like the Janice Hendersons of the world or the Franklin Templetons. I mean, really big legacy TradFi names. And I think this had a lot to do with, the success of the early Anemoy pool and being able to tokenize those treasury T-bills really led to what has just a big news that's somewhat recent for those who are unaware, was getting third place in the Spark Prize, which led to an injection of another 250 million or $250 million into those tokenized T-bills. So maybe expand a little bit about how Centrifuge has always focused on sort of this TradFi institutional group and how this is continuing to build on the success you've already initiated.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's really cool to highlight there is that Spark Grand Prix partnership is actually over $400 million right now, which is really a testament to like building up the right relationships and then building the right foundation and helping to kind of grow that together as the market grows, right? So yeah, one of the big pieces that we worked on is building this tokenized T-bill fund and making it as easy as possible to integrate into DeFi. And one of our main customers and partners for that has been Maker, and specifically the Spark SepDAO. They announced this Grand Prix tokenization kind of RFP process about a year ago. And they so we went through a very long process together with I think over 40 applicants that all try to kind of prove how their tokenized T-bill offering was the best. And I think where really stood out was on a few different fronts. One was on the technology side, and I'll talk about that more in a second. Number two was very much on the institutional partnership with Janice Henderson and the level of kind of quality that we set up there together. And then three was around like how well integrated this into DeFi and how everything is really set up to be a fully tokenized offering. And this last part I also want to kind of briefly talk about is incredibly important. What you very often see in this market is that a lot of kind of parties basically take an off-chain fund or an off-chain financial product and create like an on-chain wrapper. And very often you're not even really able to buy the wrapper on-chain directly with stablecoins. You can only buy it off-chain and then kind of issue the tokens on-chain, and then you can potentially trade them. Generally also quite complex with KYC, with KYB requirements. And so what we really set out is to try and solve that problem. And so we've done that on kind of two levels. So number one is really launch a fully tokenized fund structure which can be settled directly on chain with stablecoins and different stablecoins as well. And then number two is we launched this product called deRWA, which is basically a product that allows easier access to these financial products to any user. What you can do is you can basically subscribe to a DE token. So let's say you want to subscribe to the DE version of the JTRSY T-bill fund. That is actually fully, there's no KYC requirements for that. And then you can actually freely transfer that token in DeFi. So you can put it into Uniswap, put it into Morpho, put it into Alpha, wherever you might want to use it, without any KYC requirements. And that really unlocks all of the composability that you want to have in DeFi, right? And so I think that's really a huge step for the industry. I would say it's really the next step for RWAs, right? Even though we've been working on RWAs for a long time and it's been around for a little while, most RWAs today are still very hard to use in DeFi. And I think that's really the next big problem to solve. And I think with deRWAs, we're doing just that. And then maybe to add to that, right? Like I mentioned technology already, and of course, always happy to dive into that part. I think a really key part, and you already mentioned this, was around the standard that we worked on called ERC 7x40. So a very widely adopted standard in DeFi today is already ERC 4626. They're called the tokenized vault standards. That was originally pioneered by the Yearn team and Joey Santoro and the Superform team and a few other teams. And it's basically set the standard for how do you buy and sell a token in DeFi. And this is already used by, I think, over 14 or $15 billion of TVL today, including Maker and Morpho and so on. The problem with that standard, or at least the limitation of that standard, is that it requires that you can buy and sell a token instantly or atomically, which is not really possible for most RWAs. With a T-bill fund, even to subscribe, you generally need to go through an approval process with the fund administrator. And then to redeem, you generally need to actually sell some of the underlying T-bill holdings, which takes at least a few hours, best case, generally 1 business day, average case. And so it's not possible to do this part atomically. And so instead, we co-authored the standard with a few other industry kind of leaders that allows asynchronous subscriptions and redemptions. And so this is really important because it means that any protocol can directly integrate the settlement process of these tokens and directly integrate the buying and selling of these tokens, despite them being, despite it not being instant, right? So it kind of reduce that limitation. So that's actually led to Maker being able to integrate this token much faster than any of the other tokens because it was plug and play. And they can also then use the same integration with ERC-7540 to plug in any other RWA product, which is incredibly important because we're all about T-bills today, but it's in the end a very boring and safe asset. And I think you're going to start to see much more interesting financial products being incorporated in DeFi in the next years, but probably even months.
Awesome. Over the last few years, RWAs, stablecoins, they've been a big catalyst in the maturation of the institutional side of the crypto space. From a regulatory perspective, as the bridge between DeFi and TradFi continues to be built, are you having conversations with lawmakers, regulatory bodies, and if so, are they becoming easier or more complex as the regulatory bodies begin to wrap their heads around what kind of products are being built in the DeFi space?
Yeah, we definitely are. And right, I think first of all, what's most important to mention here is that one of the things we're doing as an RWA tokenization protocol is actually looking at like what are the traditional legal structures that work well for these kind of assets and taking the best lessons from that. So if you look at the structure of the T-bill funds, it's very similar to any regular fund structure that you would see in traditional finance. Big difference, of course, it's tokenized, meaning that ownership is actually with the on-chain ERC-20 tokens. And so that's a big difference. The challenge is, or one of the challenges is that you can't easily spin up a legal structure where tokenization gives you ownership into the underlying shares in most jurisdictions. And so absolutely we're working on like talking to regulators and talking to different parties about what can be done there. And I think one of the most important steps there is actually working with the institutional partners that we're already working with, right? Because a lot of the asset managers, a lot of the other partners that we're partnering with, they are already very closely involved with regulators, already very involved with all of these kind of ecosystems. And so I think one thing that can work very well to our advantage is if we can show the benefits of DeFi, if we can show the benefits of tokenization, then we kind of get all of these asset managers, all of these institutions on our side, and we can kind of ultimately fight this better together, right? And I think we're much more likely to win because it is an incredibly long and hard fight. And so we need the right partners at our side for that.
So you kind of already alluded to what's happening with some of the new things that are coming for V3, right? Very somewhat recently from this recording, Centrifuge had a big announcement with V3 coming up and being launched, including some of that deRWA token stuff. But one of the things we didn't get a chance to talk about is that you are going to actually be in a multi-EVM environment. So what's new about Centrifuge V3 is that you're able to deploy, and then according to just even recent, I saw something, an announcement on X with Baji talking about how it's also going to be working on Solana too. So it seems like you guys are really going to be able to proliferate your products on multiple chains. So figure like we have to talk about this because this is huge news, because one of the things we see that's such a constant thorn in the side of virtually every blockchain product is isolation and being in a single ecosystem, a single chain. And now with Centrifuge being sort of the de facto leader of RWAs, in my mind, the ability to go to multiple chain environments and have these easy deployments where people can tokenize assets is a massive game changer. So I'd love to just hear a little bit more about V3, the vision, and where this is all going for the future of Centrifuge.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like what I explained first is like our main goal and what we're starting to focus on in our strategy is to really build open infrastructure for what we would call on-chain asset management. What I mean by that is today, any new RWA product that's launching is kind of rebuilding the same modules, the same building blocks themselves again. So every single RWA startup is doing all of this work over and over again. That can work if you're launching a single ERC-20 token on a single blockchain, but that creates a lot of like liquidity separation, right? And so our goal is to really build this, what we're now calling the launchpad, which is this multi-chain product that allows any RWA product builder to actually use our infrastructure and use that to launch their own RWA products with Centrifuge as the kind of underlying white label platform, if you will. The idea there being that if you're launching a new RWA product, if you're an asset manager tokenizing some kind of new fund structure, you're going to want to distribute this as widely as possible. You're going to want to launch this on as many chains as possible. You're going to want to integrate it with as many DeFi protocols as possible, right? Because ultimately the distribution side is the most compelling value proposition of blockchain today for tokenization. And so there's a lot of work in doing that over and over again. And we're building this set of building blocks and that enable you to do that easily. I think what's also really interesting there is that every RWA product is unique in some way. If you talk about RWAs, it's a bit of an odd acronym because really an RWA is just a financial asset, and there's really many types of financial assets. And I mean, it's obviously the many trillion-dollar market. So it's not really feasible to just build a single technology platform for any RWA, but rather our goal is to build this kind of basic framework that then others can kind of build upon and customize themselves. So very concretely, that means anyone can go to Centrifuge, launch a new tokenized offering, deploy their token and vaults on multiple chains, and then manage the kind of liquidity that's invested also on multiple chains. And then all of that can either be done very manually with kind of more simple fund structures, or they can be fully automated and built and customized with smart contracts on top of the core Centrifuge protocol. I think that's a really compelling offering that I haven't really seen before in the market, and I'm very curious to see like what's going to be built on top of.
So I like to usually ask an existential question to our guests, but usually it's along the lines of where do you see the future of the internet? But for this conversation, really quick, and you may have to shorten your answer for time, but where do you see the future of financial markets? Is it going to be built on blockchain, every single thing, every asset's going to be tokenized, or will it be a hybrid of today and what's coming tomorrow?
To me, the time scale is the question, but it's inevitable and obvious that every financial market will be underpinned by blockchain technology. I think this is ultimately more efficient, more accessible, more transparent. It benefits almost everybody. And I think if you see the head of the largest asset manager in the world talking about how this is inevitable, I would tend to agree with him. The time scale is hard. I think 50 years from now, this is clearly going to happen. 10 years from now, we're probably still in a transition process. But definitely, I think every single asset will be traded through AMM protocols on different Ethereum-based blockchains or different other blockchains. And it might not be obvious to the users because it might all be abstracted away, kind of this DeFi mullet idea, but the underlying infrastructure absolutely will be blockchain and DeFi protocols.
Awesome. And for those who want to follow along the journey and see what's being built, what's the best place for people to follow you and stay up to date on Centrifuge's latest developments?
Yeah, you should definitely follow us on X or Twitter. So we're just at Centrifuge, and I think I will share all the best updates there. We have a lot of exciting announcements that we haven't even been able to talk about yet in the next few weeks leading up to E2C. So definitely follow us there.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for taking the time to visit with us, Jeroen, today. This was a great conversation. And for those of you who are watching, tuning in today, or maybe listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, thank you so much for tuning into this episode of DecentraLounge. We will see you again on the next episode next time. Take care, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.